never believed in the idea that your home could turn against you until that rainy Thursday. My name is Alex, and that night, after a canceled dinner plan left me alone in my small suburban house, I experienced a terror so subtle yet consuming that it still haunts my dreams. It began with nothing more than an uneasy feeling that settled in the pit of my stomach as I sipped my lukewarm tea, watching the rain cascade down my living room window. At first, I chalked up the odd sensations to nerves. I was, after all, home alone. I tried to dismiss the soft, almost imperceptible creaks of the old hardwood floor, attributing them to the inevitable settling of a house that had seen better days. But as minutes passed, an inexplicable tension gripped me. The sound came again, a gentle footfall followed by a faint groan near the living room door. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the sound had alerted any intruder lurking in the shadows. I stood frozen, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. It must be the house, I muttered to myself, convincing my racing mind. Yet, deep inside, every instinct screamed that something was off. I peered into the dim hallway where a soft glow from a faulty street lamp seeped through the window, its light strangely misplaced, as if someone had tampered with the setting. The silence that followed was almost louder than the sounds that had preceded it. Curiosity and dread battled within me as I retraced my steps. I began a cautious search of every corner of my house. I double-checked the windows, tugged at the curtains, and listened intently in every room. Nothing seemed amiss until I reached the back door. There, lying on the wet concrete, was a single shoe, damp with rainwater and distinctly out of place. My pulse quickened as I noticed a thin, irregular trail of muddy footprints that led from the door toward the staircase. The realization that someone had been in my home sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, my hand trembling as I fumbled for my phone. My instincts told me to dial emergency services, but a moment of doubt made me hesitate. I stood in the center of my living room, feeling completely vulnerable, as if every shadow had eyes. The sound of my own breathing was deafening. Eventually, I managed to tap the emergency button, my voice barely a whisper as I reported what I had found. Every creak of the floorboard became a new terror. Then, as if fate had decided to mock my vulnerability, my doorbell camera, which I had installed only for peace of mind, captured something unnerving. The recording showed a blurry figure, cloaked in darkness, gliding past the back door, its movement deliberate and unhurried. The figure vanished into the night, leaving me with more questions than answers. There was no sign of a struggle, no clear evidence of what exactly had happened, yet the violation of my space was undeniable. I spent the rest of the night in a state of restless alertness, unable to shake the thought that the intruder might still be lurking somewhere in my home. Every creak, every shadow, seemed to pulse with the possibility of danger. I kept the lights on and my phone close, though the silence of the house only amplified the isolation I felt. Even the gentle patter of the rain against the window transformed into a sinister whisper, as if it were narrating a secret only the night could understand. In the following days, I sought answers, questioning friends and neighbors about anything unusual they might have seen. No one else had noticed any disturbances, and the police, after a brief inspection, deemed the evidence too slight to pursue further. The misplaced shoe, the muddy footprints, and the blurred image on my doorbell camera were all that remained as proof of that chilling encounter. I was left with a lingering sense of violation and a deep mistrust in what I once considered my sanctuary. Now, when I return home after long days at work or even just for a quiet evening, there is a palpable tension that I cannot escape. I have learned to listen for those soft, creaking sounds, and to scrutinize every detail in the dark corners of my house. The experience has irrevocably changed the way I view my surroundings. My safe haven has transformed into a place of uncertainty and silent menace. I still wonder who, or what, was behind that intrusion. Was it a desperate wanderer, or someone with more malicious intent? The questions remain unanswered, leaving an uneasy void in my thoughts. Every time I lock my door at night, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see that same shadow flicker in the periphery of my vision. Even now, The rain tapping on my window seems to murmur secrets of a night when an invisible intruder breached my home and my peace, leaving behind a mark that time and light can never fully erase. It was a chilly autumn evening when I found myself alone in my apartment, a situation I hadn't planned for. My roommate unexpectedly had left town without a word, leaving me in a space that once felt safe but now seemed strangely vulnerable. I settled on my couch with a book, determined to enjoy a quiet night, even though an odd sensation of being watched crept up on me. At first, it was subtle, a slight disturbance in the reflection of my television screen. I glanced at the flickering images and thought I must be tired. The shadow was dark, amorphous, moving in a way that didn't belong to the static objects around me. I tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a trick of the light, yet a chill ran down my spine. The feeling of unease lingered as I returned to my book, though I couldn't shake the idea that something wasn't right. As the evening wore on, small details began to add to my anxiety. A faint shuffling sound, almost imperceptible, emanated from the corridor outside my door. I paused mid-page, listening intently, but the noise faded as quickly as it had arrived. Still, it felt as if each sound was deliberately chosen to unsettle me. I found myself glancing at the door more often than usual, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. It wasn't long before I noticed another detail that sent my heart racing. I remembered locking my front door before settling in, yet when I walked over to retrieve my mail, I found the door slightly ajar. My hands trembled as I pushed it closed and double-checked the lock. The rational part of my mind argued that a draft or a faulty latch might be to blame, but every fiber of my being warned me that someone might have been there. I stood there for a few moments, the quiet of the hallway accentuating my rising dread. Still, I tried to convince myself that I was simply overreacting to the loneliness and silence. To calm my nerves, I decided to review the security feed on my phone, a system I had set up months earlier. The screen displayed the usual empty corridors until, suddenly, I saw a fleeting image of a dark, indistinct figure near the entrance. It moved slowly, almost cautiously, then melted into the darkness as if it had never been there. I replayed the clip several times, trying to make sense of the blurred shape that looked too deliberate to be a mere shadow. Questions swirled in my mind. Who could have been in my apartment? How had they entered? And for what purpose? The security footage confirmed my worst fears without offering any answers. There were subtle signs of forced entry, a barely noticeable scratch on the door frame, an unusual dent that I hadn't seen before. It all pointed to one unsettling possibility. I wasn't alone that night. Unable to sleep and with every noise amplifying my terror, I called the police. I remember speaking, in hushed tones, struggling to relay every detail as my voice quavered. The operator's calm words did little to soothe me, and I felt even more isolated knowing that by the time help arrived, the intruder might already be long gone. They assured me they would send someone over immediately, but I couldn't shake the oppressive feeling that time was slipping away, leaving me more exposed with each passing minute. The hours that followed were a blur of restless waiting and constant vigilance. I remained in the living room, every creak of the old floorboards, and every murmur of the wind outside magnifying the dread that had taken hold of me. My mind conjured up endless scenarios, each more terrifying than the last, and I couldn't help but wonder if the dark figure I had seen was still lurking somewhere in the labyrinth of my apartment. When the police finally arrived, they conducted a brief inspection and took my statement. Their findings were inconclusive. A few signs that something had been amiss, but nothing concrete enough to pursue further. I was left with a haunting void of unanswered questions. How had the intruder bypassed my security measures so effortlessly? Was it a desperate act or something more calculated? The mystery remained unsolved, intensifying the lasting impact of that night. Now, as I sit in my apartment trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy, every shadow and sound triggers a cascade of memories. The feeling of being observed never truly dissipates, and I often find myself checking the locks, replaying the security footage in my mind. The incident has altered my perception of safety in a place that was once my sanctuary. Even now, late on a crisp autumn evening, I can't help but wonder if that vanishing shadow will ever truly leave me alone. My name is Thomas, and I always believed that my family home was a sanctuary, a place of comfort and lifelong memories. I had grown up in that old house, each creak of its wooden floors and every whisper of the wind a reminder of home. That belief shattered one isolated summer night when I was left alone, with my relatives away for a long weekend. I had planned for a quiet evening, a chance to savor solitude with a steaming cup of coffee and a good book. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It began with an unsettling series of low, deliberate knocks echoing through the long corridors. At first, I dismissed the sound as nothing more than the house settling, or perhaps a stray branch tapping against the window. But as the knocks continued at irregular intervals, a creeping dread began to take hold. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, each beat louder than the last, as if warning me that something was terribly wrong. Reluctantly, I set down my coffee and ventured out into the dimly lit hallway. Every step I took on the worn wooden floor seemed to amplify the silence around me. The knocking persisted, drawing me toward the back of the house. With trembling hands, I approached the source of the noise, my eyes straining to see in the faint light. In the midst of the darkness, I discovered a back window that I was certain I had locked before settling in. Now, it lay slightly cracked open, allowing a thin sliver of moonlight to pierce the gloom. Next to the window, an unsettling scene awaited. Me, an overturned chair, its position haphazard and out of place, and a half-empty glass of water resting on a small table. It was as if someone had been there moments before, occupying the space I had assumed was secure. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that an uninvited visitor had invaded the sanctity of my home. I stepped back, my mind racing with questions. Who was this intruder, and what did they want? Had they been watching me the entire evening? Desperation quickly overtook my shock, and I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. In a barely audible whisper, I dialed the local authorities, struggling to articulate the bizarre events unfolding around me. The operator's calm voice did little to alleviate my fear as I recounted the knocks, the broken window, and the disarray near it. I clung to the hope that help would arrive swiftly, though every minute stretched on interminably. Within what felt like an eternity, I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. 2 police officers soon entered the house, their presence a brief reprieve from the terror that gripped me. They moved methodically through the back of the house, inspecting the window and the surrounding area with quiet professionalism. One officer bent down to examine a set of faint footprints imprinted on the damp earth outside. The prints were shallow, but unmistakable, evidence that someone had indeed been here and left in a hurried retreat. As the officers took notes and asked measured questions, I found myself overwhelmed by a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Their reassurances, though sincere, did little to erase the image of the uninvited visitor and the realization that my home was no longer safe. The investigation, they explained, would continue, but even the prospect of a thorough search could not dispel the anxiety that had rooted itself deep within me. In the days that followed, I remained hyper-vigilant. Every creak in the house, every whisper of the wind, seemed to echo that dreadful night. I began double-checking every lock and window, a constant reminder of the vulnerability I had once taken for granted. The memory of those deliberate knocks, the cracked window, and the overturned chair haunted my thoughts relentlessly. The intrusion had left more questions than answers, a mystery that the police could not fully unravel, leaving me to face an enduring sense of unease. Even now, when I sit alone in my family home on quiet summer nights, I can still hear those soft, persistent knocks and feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me. The experience transformed the familiar into something alien and dangerous. I wonder if the intruder, whoever they were, might return one day to reclaim that moment of terror. Until then, I live in a state of perpetual vigilance, aware that the safety of my home has been irreparably compromised. My sanctuary now bears the scars of an uninvited visitor whose presence lingers in every shadow and every creak of the floor. I shudder each time a whisper or flicker of light reminds me that my sanctuary has lost its safety.